After I finished my last video on lore secrets in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I somehow couldn't stop thinking about the game for quite some time. I ended up with even more questions about the world of the game, and so I decided to make another video. Today I want to talk about horses, Satori, the Immortal Dragons, Lynels, and finally the man himself, the Demon King Ganondorf. There will be spoilers in this video as I am talking about the story and world of Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, and some other Zelda games as well. So if you want to experience those games by yourself, pause the video and come back after you've finished. With that out of the way, let's get to the first conclusion I've drawn after intense playing and research. Horses are actually fairies. Okay, now that statement might surprise some of you, but hear me out, there is actually some logic behind it. If you have played any Zelda game before, you should be familiar with fairies. They are most often small creatures emitting light so that, except for their wings, you can only see a glowing ball of light that flies through the air. Sometimes, like in Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask, they serve as helpers and guides, but in general they're passive creatures that can be captured and used to regenerate your health. While those little guys are interesting for sure, there are also great fairies. In the world of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, there are 4 of them. Gameplay-wise, their main function is to upgrade Link's armor in exchange for materials and rupees. However, Dorian in Kakariko Village also describes them as guardian spirits, a term that is usually connected to the gods. You could therefore argue that the great fairies are among the creatures that look after the lands for the gods, who are probably not able to interfere with the events in Hyrule directly. If you remember Skyward Sword, Zelda mentioned that the goddess Hylia was not able to use the Triforce as a goddess and had to be reborn in human form to make use of this power. While the great fairies do have a physical form in this world and are definitely able to influence it, they seem to be rather passive though. They support Link and interact with other people as well, but they do not actively fight the Demon King or the Calamity. So my guess is that they are certainly powerful and probably somehow connected to Hylia or the other goddesses of the Zelda world. Their role is more of an administrative one, keeping all the workings of the world running smoothly. There is one fairy spring in Hyrule though that was quite a shock to me when I first discovered it, and a very curious figure emerged from it. This is Malenia, the god of horses. Their job in game is to upgrade or revive your horses, so there's definitely a direct connection between your hoofed friends and this rather eccentric entity. But no matter what, you have to admit that there is a similarity between Malenia and the great fairies, even apart from the fact that they all live inside fairy fountains. So we can guess that they are at least some kind of similar spirit, even though they take on different physical forms. And if fairies are minor spirits connected with the great fairies, then horses should also be minor spirits, but connected to Malenia. Hylians might have even been aware of this, at least to some extent, since there are actually monuments worshipping or at least prominently depicting horses, and the Stable Association, which concerns itself almost religiously with horses, makes up a huge number of Hylians still inhabiting the world after the Calamity. There is also one other mighty creature that is very similar to a horse. At the wetland stable, Link finds himself in the company of the Hylian hunter Quince and his loyal dog Seti. Quince has an intriguing story to share, one that unfolded on Satori Mountain and left a lasting impact on their lives. Quince, a skilled hunter, ventured to Satori Mountain during the mass animals migration in search of wild game. To his surprise, he discovered a starving dog in the wild, a rare sight as they usually lived near people. Quince offered the dog some meat, which caused it to abruptly run away. Weary from his journey, Quince took a nap, but woke up to find an enigmatic creature staring at him. Stricken with fear, Quince couldn't defend himself, and in a stroke of luck, the dog he had fed came up to his rescue, barking and scaring off the creature. Seizing the opportunity, Quince picked up the dog and swiftly left the mountain, grateful for its intervention. In an ironic twist, Quince named the dog Seti after Satori Mountain, the place where their lives intertwined. Their bond grew stronger and they became inseparable companions. The creature that Quinns and Seti encountered was most likely the Lord of the Mountain. The Lord of the Mountain takes the form very similar to, once again, a horse. Link can also mount him and ride him around Hyrule. There are a few important differences though. His body glows bright blue and his two bright golden antlers sit on a head that looks weird to say the least. It has 4 eyes and it looks more like 2 blue piece faces that are combined into one. Just like the blue piece, they bear a striking resemblance to an owl's face. There is no question that Satori is among the strangest creatures in the Zelda universe. It reminds me a bit of the Nightwalker from Ghibli's Princess Mononoke. But who is the Lord of the Mountain? And what is his purpose if we assume that all the spirits have a certain role to play in the workings of the world? According to the Hyrule Compendium, the Lord of the Mountain is the reincarnation of a sage that died around the area of Satori Mountain. And there is actually a place very close by that on the map is called the Sage's Temple. Like many other places in central Hyrule, however, it is in ruins, probably from the Calamity, but maybe even longer than that. It is never stated which sage this temple belonged to. It is definitely not the sages from Tears of the Kingdom, at least not the new ones, so it could either be the original sages from Roru's time, some of their successors before the Calamity, or some completely different person that went by the moniker of a sage, which in the end just means a wise person. It is hard to say. I don't really think it would be a Zora or a Goron, since they generally live further away, and Gerudo or Rito also seem a bit out of place. It is not impossible, but it feels weird. My first thoughts went to Saria, the Sage of the Forest Temple in Ocarina of Time, since we are talking about an entity protecting nature and animals, but there are no Kokiri in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and no talk of a forest sage per se. Maybe there used to be something similar in the time before Breath of the Wild. It's far-fetched, but I like it more than trying to twist the personalities and cultures of the existing sages to fit with the story. Since the Lord of the Mountain or the Satori looks like a Bluepie, there are actually also a lot of stories about Bluepies being told around Hyrule. If you're talking to Peaks in Korok Forest and finish his quest, he will tell you his theory about Bluepies being responsible for creating all the rupees in the world, which is interesting. I mean, we find rupees in the weirdest places in Zelda games, and at least I have asked myself time and time again why we find rupees where we find them. It would be interesting to see what effect this has on Hyrulean economy, if there are literally beings that create money. But then again, rupees are also used by other entities like great fairies, so they are probably not exclusively used as exchange tokens, but have some other more mystical practical use as well. This also would not be that uncommon. We know that some older cultures, especially around Japan and China, sometimes used things like rice as a currency, which apart from being able to be traded, could also be eaten. So there is still a lot of questions here, but I think it gives us a better idea of what role Satori and the Bluepies play. Similar to fairies, dragons are often depicted as guardian spirits in Zelda games. In Skyward Sword, which takes place closest to the time of the gods, we encounter Eldin, Farron and Lanaryu, the dragons who teach us the Song of the Hero, and who funny enough bear the same names as some of the regions we visit in various games. Those dragons still appear quite humanoid and are able to speak the same language as the Hylians, whilst the big windfish Levias was appointed by the goddess Hylia as the protector of the skies, the dragons serve as protectors of the land. Another example would be Valoo from the Wind Waker, who is supposed to be the spirit who teaches the Rito how to fly. In Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, there are still dragons around, but they seem a bit different. Nadra, Farosh and Dinral do not speak. In fact, they do not seem particularly interested or bothered by what is happening in Hyrule in general. Still, according to what we hear from the goddess statues at the Divine Springs, the dragons are still guardian spirits serving the springs and therefore the goddess. I'm only speculating, but I believe that something happened in the time between Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild that made the dragons more passive. My guess is that since the Hylians were able to properly build their civilization after the threat of demise was neutralized, the need for more active guardian spirits was not there anymore, so the likes of Eldin, Farron and Lanaryu retreated from this world. Contrary to this, the descent of the Zonai might have been a time where those kinds of spirits saw the need to return. If you have seen my last video, you might remember my theory about the Zonai actually being descended from dragons, which also explains the Light Dragon and the Demon Dragon. If you're interested in that, I will leave a link to the video on screen. Also, if you like this kind of content, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. It helps a lot and gives me a hint about what kind of video I might make in the future. Not all dragons seem peaceful though. Aesthetically, my favorite boss from the Zelda franchise, Volvagia from Ocarina of Time, looks very similar to the dragons from Tears of the Kingdom, but as the game tells us, he has been twisted by Ganondorf and is used to threaten the Gorons. And of course there are beings like Argorok, and now also in Tears of the Kingdom, the Gleeroks. I'm not sure if Gleeroks are monsters summoned by Ganondorf and the Gloom. The cutscenes from Tears of the Kingdom have shown us that this is the origin of many other monsters we encounter, or if they are just regular creatures of Hyrule. If the latter is true, then they might be just different form of spirits that has evolved or devolved into a more feral creature over time. We do know, however, that there are a wide variety of curious creatures serving the Demon King. Lynels might have become the most recognizable Zelda enemy since their appearance in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. They are very dangerous creatures who, apart from dealing a lot of damage, are also quick, agile, and can attack from various distances. For many players, especially new ones, Lynels are quickly becoming a literal nightmare. They are the type of enemy that tests how skilled players have become with the game's mechanics and require them to effectively read their movements and adapt just as quickly. But Lynels are also very interesting from a narrative perspective, as they behave more like wild animals than monsters. If you take a look at Moblins, Lizalfos, or Bokoblins, they almost always attack you the moment they see or hear you. Their behavior is very wild and aggressive, but Lynels are different. If you meet a Lynel in the wild, you will immediately see that they are not moving rashly at all. All of their actions seem very deliberate. If they spot you, at first they will probably not attack you, but only stare at you, as if trying to figure out if you are a threat and worthy of their attention, or if you will just turn around and leave. If you get closer though, or draw a weapon, they realize and, well... So what exactly are Lynels? They are some kind of beast, yes, and they seem, at least to some extent, to follow the Demon King. Or maybe they are made to follow. But as I said before, they behave very differently than most other creatures from Ganondorf's army. Chances are that they are still, just as Bokoblins, creatures of the Gloom. My theory is that most monsters we encounter in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are actually created by the Demon King. We can see this act in the cutscene after Ganondorf acquired his secret stone. Amongst the creatures he summons, there are also the Lynels. Still, they seem to have a special position amongst his forces, and he doesn't seem to be able to command them as easily and freely as some of his other minions. I first thought of this when I had to face the Demon King's army fight, right at the end of Tears of the Kingdom. There I was wondering, why does he not summon or station some Lynels here? It would make sense for him to have at least some of his probably strongest troops defending this position, but no. In the whole chasm underneath Hyrule Castle, we encounter but one Lynel, and he's quite far from the boss arena. I have to admit, I found some comfort in the idea that most of Ganondorf's lackeys are just red and purple goo that takes a physical form, and we are not running around slaughtering some less advanced culture. But Lynels make me think a bit more. Are they also spirits? They look a little bit like horses. Did Ganondorf not create them, but only adapt them? Does it actually matter where they come from, and should I rather concentrate on their actions here and now? Fact is, there is so much we do not know about enemies in Zelda games, nor about how they fit into Ganondorf's plans. So maybe it is time to look a bit closer at the man himself. In Tears of the Kingdom, like in many other Zelda games, Ganondorf is introduced as the King of the Gerudo. His Gerudo heritage is confirmed in the dialogue between him and Roru in the Dragon Tear memory, as well as from Urbosa's monologue before she fires her divine beast in Breath of the Wild. Apparently there is only one male Gerudo being born to the tribe every 100 years, who by tradition is named their leader. It is implied that a Gerudo male can only be born after their previous king has died, as Ganondorf's sealment 10,000 years prior resulted in the Gerudo no longer having any male children afterwards. Which means that Ganondorf must have experienced quite a privileged upbringing already. In all the Zelda games, the Gerudo have often been shown as a tribe of thieves, raiders and pirates, generally following a morally ambiguous lifestyle. However, in Breath of the Wild as well as Tears of the Kingdom, they are primarily merchants. It's hard to say if this has always been the case or if they have changed over time. Gerudo live primarily in the desert, which is a very rough terrain that is probably not as rich in resources and produce as the lush lands of central Hyrule. This could be a reason why Ganondorf, as their leader, initially decided to venture outside the desert and claim more fertile lands. Wars being fought in order to control food sources are not that far-fetched. While we know that Ganondorf turned into the Demon King by taking Queen Sonia's secret stone, the secret stones only amplify someone's power, which means that the power of the Demon King must have already been inside of Ganondorf. This is also not that big of a surprise if we consider that he is probably a reincarnation of Demise from Skyward Sword, but why would Demise be specifically reborn into the Gerudo tribe? It seems too specific to be a coincidence. Did something happen to the Gerudo of old, that the whole tribe has been cursed or maybe chosen by this evil deity? Is that the reason for why there are no other males born into the tribe? The fate of the Gerudo is, in my opinion, one of the most fascinating questions in the Legend of Zelda series, and I hope that there will be a game at some point that explores this a little bit further. There is just so much potential there. In the meantime, we can just collect our own ideas and craft theories. And if you have any ideas on how Ganondorf or Demise could be connected to the Gerudo tribe, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear anything that comes into your head. No matter what initially motivated Ganondorf, we know that his ego, the fact that he has been raised as a special individual, and the fact that he probably inherited dark powers from birth, took the better of him at some point, and fueled his desire to change the world. We know that he hates the light, the sun, something that can be very dangerous in the desert, a place where you hide in dark caves in order to not be burned by the light. That being said, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please consider giving it a like. If you want to stay up to date with any future videos I make, you can also subscribe to my channel. I have a lot of other videos planned that I hope that I bring out soon, so I hope that I will see you all there, and until then, have a good time. Bye.